Hi, thanks for joining me for my Monday Mashup today. My name's Jo and I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator based in the UK. Today we're going to be making this card here. It's another sort of snowy sort of scene, but it's a way to incorporate parts of stamps as opposed to a whole stamp. So I wanted to show you different ways that you could do that. So this is the, as I say, the card we're making. We have an early espresso base card. I would put an insert in this to send out. We have cinnamon cider as our next layer and then a whisper white panel. So if I can just give you those measurements. So this is early espresso and it measures 21 centimetres by 14.85 and it's scored at 10.5 to give our card base. So that's a standard C6 card. I then have my whisper white panel and this measures 9.5 by 13.85 and then I have a cinnamon cider layer which is just 3mm larger on two sides of the whisper white panel, just to give me a really tiny sort of slim border on this. So you want to be cutting it at about 9.8 by 14.15. So you can go a little bit bigger if you wanted to, of course. I just wanted a really sort of thin border on this one. So that's all we need for the base. I am using 3 stamp sets today. Now, a couple of these have featured in recent videos because they're really useful for Christmas sort of cards and Christmas effect type cards. So that's why they sort of keep sort of reappearing. So this is Peaceful Boughs. Now, we used this with the gnomes a few weeks ago. So it's quite a versatile sort of stamp set. We're also using Winter Woods today, and we're using this little fern here and also this little pine cone. And then, of course, Nature's Beauty, which has this amazing sort of snow scene sort of stamp. So we're just going to be using that one from there. So that's our 3 stamp sets. So the first thing I want to do is to create my background. So I'm just going to bring in a piece of scrap paper so that I can sponge onto that so you can see how I build up the colours. And we're going to start with pumpkin pie. So if I open that first of all, and I'm using one of our sponge brayers because these lay down colour really, really nicely and give a really nice overall effect. So I want to, first of all, ink up my roller. Now, notice I'm going in one direction so that I get a nice coating over the whole of the roller. And then starting off on my page, I'm just going to start bringing this in onto my whisper white piece. Now, there's no sort of given area that I want you to sponge really. You're sponging sort of this section, if you like. This is mainly going to remain white, but we just want to build up a bit of colour and then getting lighter as we go to the edges. And as you can see, I'm just building up that colour just gradually. You want it darker in this corner here, which will become our top. And I'm just building it up slowly. As I say, I want it to be lighter in this area, so I'm sort of going across at a sort of angle really. Okay, so now what I want to do is just to add a little bit of cinnamon cider. So this is quite dark. I'm going to be using the same roller, but I don't want to add too much of this because, say, it is quite dark. I just want to bring this in really on the top corner and the edges really. So it's better that you start this sort of lighter and then you can just build it up. Okay, so I'm quite happy now that I've sponged that area. As you can see, I've left this sort of white. just going to take some of that colour off, and I'm just going to gradually just bring some more into that white area so that it just sort of lightens out really nicely. Okay, so now that's done, what I want to do is to stamp my branches. So as I say, this is the stamp that I've taken from the Beautiful Boughs stamp. So this is this one here. And all I want is the actual branches. So I'm not using any of this greenery. So this is where I say, if you look at a stamp, don't always look at it as its final stamp. You can use elements of it. So all I'm doing is using a pen, which is soft suede, just so it's that little bit lighter. And I'm just colouring those branches. Don't worry about being too precise on this, because you'll see it'll all disappear as we work. So as I say, I've just coloured those branches, and I'm going to just stamp that onto my card and just off of that edge there. I'm going to do the same again. So again, I'm just going in with soft suede just onto those branch parts. And again, I want to stamp this, and I'm going to sort of come down at a bit of an angle here. Okay, so don't worry if you get sort of little blotted areas, because we are going to fill all those in, so don't worry about those. This is what we sort of want to be looking at. And the next thing I want to do is I'm just going to put some of this colour onto this block here. And I'm going to use one of our blender pens. I'm just going to make sure that the end is clean. And I want to pick up some of that colour and just colour in the middle of those branches. The reason I'm using a blender pen is because I don't want it to be too dark. Whereas if I use the soft suede pen straight away, you'd find that it is really quite dark. So that's the reason. You can go straight in with a pen if you wanted to. That's not a problem. But obviously you just want it to be slightly lighter. And again, you don't need to be too precise about this, because we're going to be stamping all over the top of this. This is just purely background. Okay, so now that's our branches done. So now what we want to do is to start adding some of our greenery. So I'm using this little fern stamp, and this, as I say, was taken from Winter Woods. So it's this little one here. And I'm going to be using a mixture of shaded spruce and also old olive. So we've got a real nice sort of light and darkish sort of colour mixture. So what I'm going to do is to ink it up. First of all, I'm going to start with my old olive, and I'm going to do 2 stamps with that colour. So I've inked it, I'm just doing 2 stamps, and I'm literally randomly stamping them on top of each other to create our tree. Now, don't worry if you go over like here. These are all going to be covered, so don't be too precise about it. You want it to be quite random, like a tree would be. Let's say first generation and second generation, just overlap them. Don't worry about this gap we've got here at the moment, because we're going to put some pine cones over there, so that will hide that. It's just being a bit sort of free with your stamping, really. You just want to and you're literally just going to build those up until you're happy that you've got some full branches. Okay, so now that I've done the old olive, I just want to add a few of the shaded spruce. So make sure you got to Stamp Up the right way, because I didn't then. Fortunately, I got away with it. And again, sort of first and second generation, you're just going to add some more of that colour through the middle. And that way you just get a nice mix of the two colours, really. Okay, so once you're happy that you've laid down the greenery that you like, the next thing we want to do is to add some of the actual pine cones. So I'm just going to clean this because we're going to use this again in a moment. So I'm now taking the Early Espresso ink pad, and I want to position my cones sort of next to my branches. So I'm just randomly stamping them again just to add some cones to where the branches are, and you'll see the branches start to disappear a little bit, but the detail is there enough for it to actually show that's what they are. And you can add as many or as few as you want to, really. Okay, so I think I'm just going to add one more just down here. There we go. So now that I've added those, if I want to make them a little bit darker, you can just go over the top with your blender pen, and just very lightly and not in any great detail. I'm just literally just bringing that colour through just to make them stand out a little bit more, depending on how light your background is. I have some others to show you in a moment. You may or may not want to do this part, it's entirely up to you, but I think it just, if it's quite dark, it just sort of makes that stand out that little bit more. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is to add my greeting. So I'm just going to ink my Stamp Up with Early Espresso, and I'm going to position this at the bottom. And that greeting is also taken from the Peaceful Boughs stamp. You can see that at the bottom there. Okay, so I just want to give that just a moment or two just to dry off, just to make sure that my ink is nice and dry. And then I'm just going to rub over with a dust buddy. This is just purely to remove any kind of grease or oil that may be stuck, and also as well, because our ink is still quite wet, you might find that you get little sort of bits on there. So that's what I've done there. I'm then going to take my Versamark ink pad, and I want to add some white of the pine leaves. Now, if you saw my video from last week, you would have seen that we did a similar technique to this with the deer, and it is very similar, subtly different, because obviously we're going over the top of our sort of leaves and pine cones and things like that. So don't be frightened to stamp straight over the top. It's not you're not trying to get into the gaps. You do want to go over the top of it. And what I'm going to do now is just add some white embossing powder, just so I can see where I've been, because it is very difficult to sort of keep track of where you're going with it. And then I can add a few more as I want them. Okay, and again, don't be frightened to overlap them, because in nature, obviously, all our leaves and branches would overlap each other. Okay, I'm just going to pop one more over here. So what I want to make sure is that I have no sort of really big stray pieces of the embossing powder. If I have bits and pieces, it doesn't matter, because that'll all add to the snow effect that we're going to do afterwards. But I just want to try and remove as much as I can. Okay, so I'm going to pop that back in its pot, and then I'm just going to bring in my heat tool, and then I'm just going to heat that through. Okay, so as you can see now, that's added some of the whiteness to my branches, and we're now going to build up the actual snow area. So I've used this dotty stamp from the Nature's Beauty stamp set, and I'm literally going to ink and stamp 2 or 3 times. Because this has got glycerine in it, you'll get away with several stamps, and it's completely random, so don't worry where they're stamping, where they're overlapping, it really doesn't matter. So this is a nice quick card to do, so if you were doing sort of multiple cards, it's quite a nice one to be able to do. So again, pop that back in there, and I'm just going to reheat this. Okay, so that's now all set. Now if you wanted to, you could go in and add some more snow if you haven't quite got sufficient. I'm quite happy with what I've got here, so that's absolutely fine. But what I am going to do is to use the same dotty stamp with, again, a little bit of cinnamon cider. Put these all out the way. And I'm not going to ink it all up, I'm just sort of tapping it a little bit, and then I'm just going to tap some little dots over the background. I think it just adds a little bit of interest to that background, really, and away from all those sort of white dots, it just lifts it just that little bit. So there we go. So that is the actual base card made. So the next thing we want to do is just to mount it onto my card. So if I bring those back in. So as I say, this is my cinnamon cider, but of course you could use any combination of colours. I'm normally quite a traditionalist when it comes to Christmas. I like sort of the reds, the greens, the golds, all that sort of thing, but every now and then it is just nice to recreate cards that kind of aren't your traditional colours, but sort of add a nice bit of interest nevertheless. So as I say, I have done 2 or 3 of these in different colours, which I'm going to show you in a moment, and you'll see they can sort of look really pretty in all sorts of colours, really. So I like this because it's sort of autumnally, sort of wintry. It's sort of that time in between autumn and winter. There we go, so that's all stuck down. And the last thing I did was I just added a few of our adhesive gems just to add that little bit of sparkle that obviously wasn't there. So I'm just going to add 2 or 3 of these little ones. And there you go. So that's today's Monday Mashup card. As I say, I did do it in a couple of different colours, which I thought might be quite nice to show you, just so that you could see how different they are. Now, I'm first of all bringing in the first one. As you can see, I did this background slightly lighter, and I didn't perhaps add so much greenery. It's in a slightly different area, but I think actually it's how you build it up as you go through. So you can see this one sort of follows more of a sort of bow of a tree sort of thing, where this one's perhaps a little bit more sort of closed up. So that's that colour. As I say, then I have also recreated it in blues. So for this I have used Balmy Blue to sponge my background, and then I've used Misty Moonlight for my branches, and a little bit of Pretty Peacock, and also Night of Navy for the actual pine cones. So you can see it's sort of a real sort of mixture of the blues, but I think actually that looks really quite pretty. And then finally I decided to do one into pinks. So I used Blushing Bride as my base colour Rococo Rose for the branches and some of the leaves, and then Blackberry Bliss I've used for the pine cones. So again, they're just 3 different versions of the same card in different colourways, so that you can, you know, choose your favourite and have a play, perhaps with some different colours altogether. But I think they just sort of were the colours that sort of sprang to my mind, which are sort of non-traditional Christmas, really. So I hope you like that today. I will see you next week for another Monday mashup. Take care. Bye.